So, Ronald Reagan was an awful person. Surprise, but he is much worse than you have probably thought. It is my extremely humble, but also extremely correct belief that he's the worst modern-day president. There are a lot of problems with the US, and obviously there are many factors that contribute to what makes the US the way that it is, but I'm here to argue that Ronald Reagan is the root of most of our political issues.
Former President Ronald Reagan died of pneumonia this afternoon at his home in California. Hold up.
So then, who is this mysterious Ronald Wilson Reagan? He was an actor, governor, president, and terrible person. He served as President of the United States from 1981 to 1989, and during his time destroyed the middle class, created millions of drug addicts, and funded terrorist organizations. Reagan was very passionate about hating poor people and minorities. He was taken from us too late and died from pneumonia on June 5, 2004. The big scandal around his presidency was the Iran-Contra affair. The Iran-Contra name refers to Iran and Nicaragua. During the 70s, Nicaragua was suffering under the Somoza dynasty, a fascist rule. So this group called the Sandinistas, or FSLN, overthrew the dynasty in 1979. They were a socialist group that created policies of free healthcare and mass literacy. They were accused by many groups, notably the Heritage Foundation, a right-wing group associated with the Reagan administration, of human rights abuse, but all I have seen are accusations, little proof. The Soviet Union supported the Sandinistas, so the US had to do something to stop the spread of communism. The CIA and Reagan administration backed the Contras, a right-wing fascist group that opposed the Sandinistas. So the US starts sending millions of dollars to the Contras, but Congress doesn't like this, so they pass the Boland Amendments, an effort to stop the CIA from funding the Contras. To bypass these amendments, the CIA turns to Iran. Iran had just underwent a governmental shift from a secular fascist rule to a religious fascist rule. The government of Iran was considered to be terrorists, and Reagan famously said, "There will be no negotiation with terrorists of any kind." Then, days later, his administration sells weapons to Iran in exchange for hostages, negotiating with the terrorists. This is where the scandal is. The CIA overcharged Iran for the weapons and took the profits and sent them to the Contras. Reagan's administration sold extremely dangerous weapons to a religious terrorist group and gave the profits to a fascist revolutionary group. In 1984, there was a Nicaraguan election where the FSLN party won, proving that the CIA truly had no right to fund the Contras. Despite preaching democracy, the US was an agent of obstructing it. What's that sound? It's rain. Trickling down. You know what time it is. It's trickle-down economics time. So, trickle-down economics is the idea that the government should give a bunch of tax cuts to the wealthy and rich, and eventually the money will trickle down to the other 99% of society. This style of economics was not invented by Reagan, but it was widely popularized. Reagan implemented trickle-down economics by putting massive tax cuts to the wealthy and corporations in place, thinking that they would have more money to raise wages or create new jobs. But if there's one thing rich people are bad at, it's sharing. Additionally, by cutting taxes on rich people, Reagan severely cut down on the government's income and forced us to take on a lot of debt. During his presidency, he nearly tripled the national debt, giving us the most debt in the world. Today, the US owes $31 trillion to other countries, while second place, the UK, only owes $8.7 trillion. Next, cocaine and how it's Reagan's fault. So there was an explosion of crack cocaine in urban America in the 80s. First, an important distinction. Cocaine is different from crack cocaine. Cocaine is the powdery substance that people snort, while crack is the dark, sticky substance that people smoke or inject. Crack is cheaper to produce and provides a more immediate high. However, they have the same effect. The only difference is the method of use. They are the same chemical, and neither is worse than the other. The main difference culturally is the wealth of those who use them. Crack is primarily used by poor people of color due to its cheapness. These poor people of color are policed at a much higher rate than the rich. Cocaine is mainly used by the wealthy white people, who are less likely to be arrested. During Reagan's presidency, a large amount of cocaine was brought to the US, possibly because of the CIA, but that's debated. As America's drug problem got worse, Reagan decided that enough was enough. He was going to make a change. This change was the mass incarceration of poor minorities. He saw the prisons and was like, there's not enough people in them. I hate black people. Let's have all the black people go to prison, where all the prisoners are forced to do free labor, like slaves. Okay, the US's prison problem aside, back to cocaine. Reagan decided to tackle the drug problem by greatly worsening the punishment for drug possession, notably with crack and cocaine. He implemented a 100-to-1 ratio of cocaine to crack. If an individual was arrested with 5 grams of crack, their sentence would be a minimum of 5 years. In order to get 5 years for possession of cocaine, an individual would have to be arrested with 500 grams. Reagan made the punishment for the possession of essentially the same drug 100 times worse, simply because it is mainly used by poor minorities. Due to his crackdown on drug possession, 1 in 3 black men ages 20 to 29 were in prison by the end of his presidency. It should also be noted that Ronald Reagan most likely had Alzheimer's while president. He was officially diagnosed in 1994, but showed signs during his presidency. One study I found tracked both his and Bush's discourse complexity in their speeches. Discourse complexity just means tracking how many filler words are used as well as unique words. More filler words and less unique words is associated with developing Alzheimer's. Over the course of his presidency, Reagan used less unique words and more filler words, while Bush showed no change. So he probably had Alzheimer's, and while that doesn't make him a bad president necessarily, it does mean he wasn't fit to be president. The most powerful position in the world should not be held by someone facing a severe decline in mental capacity. He was also extremely racist, and in a leaked phone call said, and I quote, "To see those monkeys from those African countries, damn them, they're still uncomfortable wearing shoes," about the Tanzanian delicacy. Finally, I want to discuss Ronald Reagan's lasting legacy on the US. During his presidency, Reagan funded the Mujahideen, a group of freedom fighters in Afghanistan. One of those Mujahideen was Osama bin Laden, and others became the Taliban. Iran is still under fascist rule, and other presidents have continued the war on drugs unsuccessfully, and our prisons are still stuffed with minorities. Many politicians and economicists still swear by trickle-down economics, and the wealth disparity today is greater than ever. Ultimately, as praised as he was, Ronald Reagan truly did nothing good for this country. He doomed us to debt, messed up many burgeoning countries, and worsened America's drug and incarceration problems. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe. And this video is made possible by Pneumonia. Thank you so much. I couldn't have done it without you. You really came in clutch.